it's definitely true that fraudsters today are becoming more industrial, are focusing more and specializing more on either a specific fraud use case or a specific point in the food chain, so to speak. But this, while initially hindered us, and while it was harder for us as a fraud fighting team initially to focus with people that got so good at their just one part of the fraudster's journey, now can actually be used to no advantage. And this is why we talk about data, why we talk about bringing data points together. As a perfect example, nowadays fraudsters are so specialized that they could target just one type of business, just one specific industry. I focus on ticket fraud, and not just that. I focus on laundering bad tickets, or I'm a mule for the ticket industry. And what you often see is when companies are forced to work in silos, when companies are only looking, hey, us ticket companies need to look out for each other, they fall into a little bit of a trap because they're only seeing those ticket fraudsters and it's lost within their ream of good users. 95, 98, 99% of good users are almost indistinguishable. What we say when we say bring the data together, and let me be perfectly clear, we have no data. We at Identiq do not believe in data warehousing of any sort. But when we allow companies to work together across multiple industries, where ticketing companies can work with fintech companies, can work with food delivery companies and dating companies and video streaming companies, you get to see very quickly the difference between a good user, such as myself, or I'd like to think most people out there listening to this, who have 10, 50, 100 different apps and services on their phone that know them and recognize them and trust them on a daily basis, as opposed to that one fraudster who's got so damn good at targeting the travel industry. They are known to 15 travel websites and no one else whatsoever. And this is a fingerprint that you can only discover if you work cross-industry. So our entire ethos is working with the largest B2C companies in the world and letting them work together so that when you see a user for the first time, or you see a user that you think you know and you want to make sure they are who they say they are, you can go as wide as you want. Let everything from their games console to their food delivery app to their dating profile app stand up and say either yes, we know this user and we trust them, or hang on a second, this person has no fingerprint or footprint anywhere in the world except for 15 cryptocurrency websites or 5 fashion websites. And those are the red flags you can only see if you go wide. And this is something that I think the industry is very quickly adopting. We're used to speaking to customers and them saying, who else are you working with in our industry? And now the more mature customers are saying, okay, what are the large cross-industry companies that you're working with? Because if I can work with that fashion retailer and that food delivery app and those two ticketing apps, I can get a much better idea of a good user than I ever can if I work just by myself or even just within my industry. A question that we're hearing on a daily basis is, but if I give you my data, I'm at risk. You can't use my data. I don't want to work with a data consortium. I understand the value of collaborating on data, but I don't want to give you my data and I don't think you should trust me with yours. To which we are the absolute first company to stand up and say, do not give us your data. We don't want it, we don't need it, and you do not need to share it in any way in order to get the value that you would have from working together. And I would even go further, and I'll get to that in the end because we can do better because of that. But in a nutshell, what we say to our users is, we are the anti-consortium. Instead of building one large, stagnant, stale database of users from years ago, decades ago, data which by its very definition is old, we enable our companies in our network to work directly with each other so that when they see a user for the very first time, without sharing that user's data, they can understand exactly how many other members of the network already know and trust this user, know that not just this identity exists and this email belongs to a real person, but that this credit card is known to be connected to that email, and this IP address is known to be connected to this email by other members of the network that know and trust them. And the incredible thing is, and I cannot stress this enough, nobody believes us when we say that. We do not want your data. Please don't give it to us. Do not trust us with your data. We genuinely know, and we have proven, that if companies are able to work together with privacy, without sharing anything, they can validate to a much higher degree. A perfect example, you would never give away a customer's credit card to validate it. You would never give away a list of your, here are my 100 million good customers. Here are their names, email addresses, phone numbers, and credit cards. And I give that to the fraud community so that they can build an organic list of good users. That would never happen, and we know that. So when we take the data sharing constraints out, it gives our members the ability to validate much more sensitive data. Like, does this credit card match this email address? And by the way, does anyone know if this individual was seen at this IP in the last day or two? This is information which simply couldn't be validated before. But because no data is shared, and I cannot stress this enough, no member of our network ever exposes the end user data when they make a request. More than that, nobody knows who's answering the question, nobody knows who's asking the question. In fact, the member that answers the question, not only do they not learn anything about the person being asked about, they themselves don't even know if they're answering positively or negatively. And this is built on mathematical principles that have been proven time and time again, but never applied to the identity world before, because until now, the computational cost and the network cost was too high. The joy of living in a world where cloud computing prices are dropping tremendously and network speeds are increasing means that we can apply these technologies, these battle-proven technologies, to an industry that desperately needs to work together, but simply cannot share data. So we 100% are believers that if your customer gives you their data, keep it safe. Don't give it to a third-party broker who's gonna buy it, sell it, massage it, and probably sell it back to you in a couple of years. Keep it. You don't need to give it away. You can work together with companies in your industry, outside of your industry, completely across industry, and get all the value from that data to make sure that your users are exactly who they say they are without sharing anything. And that is the ethos on which we're built. The answer that we're able to give on a question of, do I know this person? Are they really who they say they are? Is built on consensus. So because it's private, you can't learn anything new about that user. You can't say, hey, I've got an email address, what's the credit card number? But what you can say is, I have an email address and a credit card, and how many other people out there know this combination? So let's say there's 200 customers on our network. If 75 come back to you and say, hey, we know this email address, we know this user, we've seen this user for the last 10 years, you can trust this user is real and isn't just made up this morning. And out of those 75, 40 of them say, and by the way, we know that this credit card is connected to this user. That is a very strong sign of validation that 40 companies out there have had trusted transactions with no chargebacks with this email address connected to this credit card number. So you were building a consensus. It's lots of yeses and nos, but when we have a network of hundreds of companies, and these companies being some of the largest companies in the world, apps and services you have on your phone and use daily, the consensus is very strong. And the counterpoint would be, we can even turn around to you and say, hey, we know this credit card number. This credit card number is known to 110 out of the 200 members of our network, but nobody has ever seen it connected to this email address, or this phone, or this home address, or this device ID, or this IP. So now we're saying to you, hey, we know this credit card is legitimate, but we are very confident it is not being used by the person who owns it. And that's something which, before the end user even knows their credit card is stolen, we are able to pick up. And what we'll say there is, hey, that's where you put the friction. So the 98, 99% of cases where it's a good user using their own credit card to ship a legitimate item to their address, zero friction. Because so many other companies have put that friction in place and already proven that this user is real. And that 1 or 2% where, hang on a second, these don't match up, that stands out like a sore thumb. And it's the perfect way for a fraud team to be able to focus on the 1 or 2 transactions that matter, as opposed to treating everyone like a criminal before they start. I think a key takeaway that we cannot stress enough to this audience, especially the audience that has lived in the fraud industry for so long, is that there is a reliance, a belief that having more data and having a larger warehouse and having extra data points fundamentally means you get to make better decisions. I think what GDPR and what CCPA have come to show us is actually, it's not always better to have more data. And sometimes there's a risk to that. But more than that, the end users don't always want you to have as much data on them as possible. And the ingrained belief that the industry has of, well, I need that data in order to keep my network safe, in order to keep bad actors off my network, was true 5 years ago, was definitely the case 10 years ago, but is simply not the case anymore. There are many companies out there, ourselves included, that give you the ability to protect your network and your assets to a higher level of accuracy and to a higher degree, and protect your end users on your marketplace to a much higher level of accuracy without sharing any data whatsoever. It's been proven time and time again that when companies work together, they are able to fight against those fraudsters that take advantage of them working in a silo. But they haven't been able to until now because of privacy. It's not just trade secrets and business secrets, it's my users' data. I can't share it, I can't stick it in a big bucket with everyone else. And our big takeaway, what we're trying to say is, you don't need to. You can validate users to a higher degree of accuracy than you can today without sharing anything. If you don't believe us, let us show you. Join those companies, some of the largest companies in the world, who are already actively using our network, who are working with us on a daily basis to make sure that their users' information is safer, more secure, and absolutely private.